Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. So Daredevil, Born Again just dropped out, a new episode, and let's just say it was crazy. A lot of things just went down, and obviously we only got two more episodes left, and it's gonna get even crazier. So if you guys like this type of content, make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. And yeah, let's just dive right into it. So in the beginning of this episode, we pretty much where we last left off, we saw Vanessa. She took that shot from Bullseye. Pretty much was going in and out. We weren't really sure if she was gonna make it, and we get hit with a crazy start. Sadly, she was not able to pull through, and we see, the effects that it's having on Kingpin. Like obviously, nobody wants to lose a loved one, and you know we see that it's foreshadowing that something bad or something crazy is gonna happen. Um, we see the doctor come in, him trying to comfort Kingpin, and as we know, that is not the right thing to do. So we see Kingpin use his brute force, his anger, and just unleashes all hell on this doctor, and ends up taking his life. Um, we see Kingpin, not phased one bit at all. Leaving the room still feeling sad and heartbroken. And we got Buck, his right hand man, to, go in there and just pretty much just clean it up. Make sure like nobody knows or sees what happens. And then later we see, the funeral take place. Obviously, we got the task force there. We got, the electives there, the governors there. Everybody there to support. And we see that obviously, like Kingpin, he's still hurting. We don't know yet where he's gonna take us in this episode, but we see the tragedy. What tragedy happens when you lose a loved one. Furthermore, we move back over to Daredevil, Karen, and Bullseye, and we see that they're doing okay. With the help of Angela and her aunt, they're able to pretty much just take care and patch up Bullseye. Not saying it was the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do. We see that there's conflict. Like I said, there's when there's good, there's always evil, and when there's evil, there's always going to be good. And we see the effects what happened. When you try to tip the balance, things aren't going good. But we'll continue with their story. We see later on with Mr. Charles. He comes to the warehouse, and we see that Kingpin is not playing around. After the death of Vanessa, we see that things are starting to take a turn. Mr. Charles comes into an empty warehouse, and he's feeling some type of way. We'll see what goes on with them. See if he wants to play Mr. Nice Guy, or if their story takes a turn. Um, but later we see, pretty much after the funeral, we go to a mysterious house, and we're not really sure who or where it is. We see the task force get involved, and we see them, get dismantled. We're seeing, who is this? Who is this all powerful? And we are hit with, a teaser. We're hit with Jessica Jones. We see that she's back once and for all, and we get to see a treat, get to see them team up, one more time. Now we head back with Kingpin, the governors, all the electives. We see, everybody still feeling the remorse, or of, the really hurt of the death of Vanessa Fisk. And we get brief encounters. Not only are they feeling, remorse, they're feeling sad, but they're also scared. They're not really sure how, how Kingpin is gonna take it. If he's gonna, reach that turning point, go back to, the full Kingpin. So everyone's pretty much just on edge. In this moment, we have a brief encounter with Daniel and BB. We notice that it's his birthday. His birthday's coming up, and as friends, they want to celebrate. And in a brief instance, we see Buck, trying to intervene, and he noticed something's a little bit off. He's not too sure yet, but he pulls Daniel aside, and he wants to know, like, where is Daniel alive? Because earlier episodes we seen that Daniel, he's still a little hesitant. He wants to be good, but at the same time he wants to make a difference. And at some point, we realize there might be a cost for him trying to make that difference. But we notice in their brief encounter that BB might be the mole. So they want to figure it out. They plan on doing any means necessary to see if she is, and hopefully we'll see what happens. But to get back with Kingpin, we noticed that he gets a call from Mr. Charles, and he's not happy with what Kingpin did. But in this moment, we see that Kingpin is starting to be the Kingpin that we know. He's not taking shit from nobody, and we see that this could be a good thing or it could be a bad thing. Now, later that day, we meet back up with Daredevil and Jessica. She wasn't happy about that and invasion on her own. Who would? So we see them, lurking, looking over the task force. They found the weapons, and we get a special treat of a great montage, a great treat of this fight scene. They're going back and forth, and we notice that something is off with Jessica. Her powers is going in and out. They're pretty much on the fence, and if it wasn't for Daredevil with his his great abilities, his heightened senses, we see that he was able to pull through and help her out. And we see that they're able to, really just foil Pin's plans. Now we go back to Heather, and we see, she's still battling those mental issues with what she did to Muse, taking his life. And we see that, she's really not able to handle it, she's, Loki going crazy, even more so every episode. She's getting more and more kind of deranged and unhinged. And we notice that Buck maybe trying to build chemistry there. We see that they could be a love interest. Him trying to help her out pretty much. And we get a weird scene of her just letting all that built up anger just rage in her. And we see that it possibly could have helped, but we'll stay tuned on her story because, things might get a little crazy. Now we go back with BB and Daniel. We're in Staten Island, and they're getting ready for Daniel's birthday celebration. Meeting his mom, and in this moment we see that Daniel wants to take Buck's advice, and we see that he gives BB some fake news. Being the reporter that she is, she wants to be the first one on the scene, and we will see, if she's the mole, and if so, what's going to happen to her. Hopefully, her story continues. Now, we go back with, Bullseye and Karen, and, we see that there's still that animosity, there's still that, tension between them for what Bullseye did to Foggy. Obviously, no one wants to lose a friend, and we see what that toll is taking on Karen. Is she willing to, change her morality, turn on the dark side for justice? And you see that in this moment, she almost gets the chance, but Daredevil comes in and stops her. And we see that, that there's tension. They're going back and forth, and we see that Karen's telling Daredevil, "There's really no way. You got to end this once and for all." And we see, through this journey of the good people, the bad people, through Daredevil's journey, we see that there's this difference between good and bad, and we see that are people going to change sides. you know Now we go back with BB and Daniel. they're at his mom's, you know, celebrating his birthday, and we noticed that BB is just really intrigued, you know, just seeing another side of Daniel. Hopefully there's sparks, there's chemistry there, and we noticed that she's getting ready to leak the information. But just for a split second, she decides to hesitate, and hopefully, you know, nothing happens of this. But we see that Daniel catches on to her, notice that she's pretty much just been spying on him, not really being the friend that she, you know, that she says she was. And we see that Daniel may not have no more options to keep her safe. So we'll see what happens with her, you know, if she's on the hunt from Kingpin or Buck. We'll stay tuned on that. But now back with Kingpin, you know, we see that people are starting to turn on to him. You know, they're not happy with, you know, what things are going. Um, you know, we see like the people of New York, they're, you know, things are getting out of control. And we see Kingpin with Daredevil. You know, Daredevil, aka Matt, he, you know, he's trying to end things, you know, once and for all. He wants the city of New York, the city that they both love, to have some peace. But we know that there can there can't always be good and there always can't be bad, you know, like there can't be just one side. There has to be a balance. And we see that they go back and forth battling out, you know, both taking good hits. We see Kingpin, you know, mess up Daredevil's arm, throw him against, you know, the painting, shattering it. And then we see Daredevil able to get back up, give him a great beating, and you know we're left with chaos just on the streets of New York. And in this moment, we see, you know, Karen and Angela able to just expose Kingpin. You know, they get video footage of survivors, explain what Kingpin did, and we see that the chaos keeps getting worse. You know, the attack force is beating on these people. We see that there's no way around it. Really, just, you know, probably the worst of the worst of what's going to happen in New York City. And at the end, we see the attack force pretty much get a hold and find Karen. Now, we'll see what happens on the next episode. Hopefully, we'll see, does she make it? You know, is BB able to make it, or does she end up leaking the information? Will, you know, Bullseye come out and help Daredevil again, or will Daredevil have to say, you know, change and, you know, end it once and for all and take the life of Kingpin? We'll see on the next episode. But like I said, if you guys like this type of information or content, you know, make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. It'll definitely help your boy out. And like I said, just we'll just stay tuned on the next episode.